The story of how I took down manipulation and regained control of my life. I never thought I'd write something like this. I've always been very reserved about my problems, the kind where I bottle everything up and pretend everything's fine. But there comes a time when things are so overwhelming that you need to get it out, even if it's just for someone to read and think, wow, that could have happened to me. That's exactly what I felt when my life turned upside down one Saturday morning out of the blue when I opened my bank email with a strange notification. And there, with my heart racing and my hand shaking, began the day that changed everything for me. That was the moment the penny dropped. And it wasn't pretty. It was dirty, painful, and humiliating. Sophia and I had been together for 4 years. Everyone thought we were the perfect couple. She was beautiful, intelligent, always smiling. I was more focused on my work, trying to build a stable life. What no one saw was how tired I'd been feeling for a long time. There was something about her that always kept me on edge, as if I were never good enough. But I thought it was all in my head, that maybe it was my insecurity, I don't know. But that Saturday, when I saw that a huge amount had been withdrawn from my account for a jewelry store I'd never set foot in, it hit me. And it wasn't just the money. It was the access, the fake names, the invitations to events she said she'd go to with me that I didn't even know existed. I spent that morning sifting through statements, emails, and social media. I entered an almost obsessive state. Each click revealed another lie. There were photos of her at galas with my last name on her name tag. People thanked me for generously contributing to causes I'd never supported. Even a post from an NGO tagging me as a main sponsor appeared. My entire body trembled. It was as if I'd been erased from my own life, and she'd borrowed my identity to live a film of luxury, status, and lies. And the worst part, everyone believed her. I was the idiot in the story, the fool who signed papers, lent cards, and believed the excuses. In that moment, between nausea and despair, I sat on the living room floor and cried like a child. I felt used, deceived, stupid. But what hurt most was remembering the time she'd looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me. How could anyone lie like that for so long? I thought about everything. Breaking up, running away, disappearing, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But a part of me screamed that I couldn't continue being an accomplice to all this, even unintentionally. I needed to do something, not just to protect myself, but to find myself again, because I didn't even know who I was anymore. That's when I decided I was going to tell the truth, not just to her, but to everyone. I grabbed my phone and wrote a straightforward text, without embellishments, without trying to protect anyone. I explained what was happening, how she was using my name, my profession, my image to gain exposure in places where I wasn't even welcome. I posted it on my professional and personal profiles. My hand was shaking so badly I almost couldn't press the publish button. But that's when I started to regain some of my courage. Within minutes, the comments started pouring in. Friends, co-workers, people who had also suspected something. It was a mixture of shame and relief. For the first time in years, I was telling the truth. What followed was an avalanche, not just of people's reactions, but of a feeling that it was all finally beyond me. I no longer had control over the situation, but at the same time, I no longer felt responsible for it. Sophia, of course, wasn't at all pleased. Within hours, threatening messages began to appear, and even accusations that I was trying to ruin her life. But what shocked me most was the reaction of some people, those I considered friends. Some sided with her, saying that I should have handled this more discreetly, and that I should have thought of her well-being too. It was then that I realized that even after everything, some people preferred the comfortable lie to the uncomfortable truth, but the truth was already out in the open, and that gave me strength. It was difficult to face what came next. The situation became a public spectacle, and in the midst of it all, I found myself struggling to cope with the weight of the judgment, as if the personal impact weren't enough. the professional. Fun also came with it. I had to deal with co-workers who didn't know what to do, with clients who began to question my ethics as if I'd been complicit in something. I found myself being swept away by a sea of humiliation, not only by the people who were on her side, but by those who, even without knowing the details, began to see me as someone who had no control over their own lives. The shame was immense. I just wanted to disappear and hide, but I knew I couldn't. I had already started something, and there was no turning back. I don't know how, but at some point that shame began to transform. Not that the pain disappeared, but somehow I began to see everything as an opportunity. Maybe it wasn't exactly a fresh start, but an awakening. I started distancing myself from everything and everyone who still tried to keep me trapped in that web. I started therapy, talking to close friends, and little by little, I began rebuilding myself. It wasn't a quick process. I still woke up with that sick feeling in my stomach, still questioning how I had let it happen, but little by little, I began to understand that, in the end, I had made the right decision, even if it was the hardest. It was as if, by telling the truth to the world, I had lifted a huge weight from my shoulders. Sophia, on the other hand, didn't give up. She did everything she could to try to turn the situation around, including sending messages to my family, telling them I was crazy and that it was all made up. Some friends even tried to make amends, as if I'd overreacted by exposing the situation. I couldn't care less. I understood that, no matter how much they tried to rewrite history, the truth was already there, and it couldn't be erased. It was a long road to being able to breathe again, but every time someone supported me, every time I saw the effect my courage had on those around me, I felt stronger. I was no longer the guy who believed there was no way out. Little by little, I freed myself from a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. I don't yet know what the future holds for me, but I know I'm no longer the person who passively let everything happen. I'm no longer the guy who's ashamed to expose a lie, who remains silent in the face of emotional and financial abuse. Today, when I look back, I see that that day was the turning point. And yes, I still feel anger and sadness about everything that happened, but I also see that the pain taught me a lot about myself, about what I'm capable of enduring, and most importantly, about the strength I have to start over. I just didn't know I could be so strong. I think sometimes life needs to push us to the edge of the cliff for us to realize that, in fact, we have wings. The hardest part of all, however, was understanding that the healing process isn't linear. I went through many ups and downs after all of this. There were days when it felt like I was finally free of that shadow, that everything was in the past. But on others, I felt weak, as if I'd been robbed of who I truly am, and the anger I felt toward her and myself never completely dissipated. It was a lesson I took a while to accept. Not all pain goes away immediately. Some scars remain, and we have to learn to live with them, because they are part of what made us stronger. I also learned to deal with loneliness. At first, I didn't know how to behave around friends who suddenly treated me like a monster. I realized that, despite everything Sophia did, I had no control over other people's reactions. Many of them chose to believe her version of events, that I was attacking an innocent person. This was another blow to my ego, and I confess I felt completely isolated for a long time. But loneliness forced me to get to know myself in a way I never imagined. I learned to be my own support. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And today, even though I still feel alone sometimes, I know I have myself and that strength. No one can take it away. Little by little, I gradually returned to my routine. Work was what helped me most. It was like a refuge where I could focus and, to a certain extent, forget the chaos of my personal life. When people started reaching out to me again, I realized that some saw me differently, with more respect. Some even came to apologize for the doubts they had cast on my integrity. The feeling of being heard, of having my version finally respected, was incredible. But the most important thing wasn't what others thought of me. It was the feeling that I was finally taking back control of my life. I was no longer a puppet. I was the master of my own choices. And then, perhaps the greatest lesson, the idea that everything resolves itself in its own time. No, I'm not saying that time heals everything. I've learned that time by itself does nothing, but it teaches, it prepares. I wasn't ready to understand everything that happened while I was in the middle of the storm. Now, looking from the outside, I see how much the situation forced me to evolve. It wasn't easy. I'll never say it was. But every step I took after making the decision to expose the truth was a step toward my emotional and financial freedom. I was no longer the victim of the story, but the protagonist of my own life. I don't know if I'll ever truly understand why Sophia did what she did. I still wonder what was going through her head. Did she truly love me at some point? Or was she just using my image to build a life she didn't have? I have no answers, and honestly, I may never have. The only thing I know is that despite everything, I managed to rebuild myself, and that, as cliché as it sounds, was the greatest lesson of all. I not only survived, but I became someone stronger, more aware, and more honest with myself. Today, I'm a different person than the one who started that Saturday feeling so lost and confused. And perhaps I finally understood that, by freeing myself from all that, I truly found myself. The truth is, no matter how much things seem to be working out, the feeling of betrayal still rears its ugly head from time to time. I look back and wonder, how could I have been so blind? How did I let it get this far? But the truth is also that this feeling of anger and regret, which at first seemed to consume me, gradually transformed into something more useful. A learning experience. Because if there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that no matter how much you prepare for life, sometimes it catches you by surprise, and the only thing you can control is how you react to it. And I chose to react with honesty, courage, and above all, the will to move forward. Today, I can say I'm in a very different place. I still have trouble trusting people, and honestly, that's something I'll have to deal with for a long time. But somehow, I realize that trust needs to be earned gradually, and that I'm more selective now. This doesn't mean I'm closed off to love or friendship, but that I've learned to be more careful about who I allow into my life. Sophia made me realize that people can often be extremely manipulative, and we don't even realize it. And throughout this whole process, I learned to trust myself. That was the greatest achievement. I learned that even if everything falls apart around you, you may be the only person capable of saving yourself. Sometimes I still have dreams about her. In some, I'm trying to explain myself. In others, we're fighting. But they don't hurt me like they used to. I realize they're just echoes of my mind trying to understand what happened. The curious thing is that in many of these dreams, I'm the one who emerges victorious. It's not because I want revenge or anything like that. I'm not that guy anymore, but because somehow my subconscious is showing me that I've been through this before and emerged stronger. So instead of trying to forget, now I just accept the pain as part of my growth. What makes me feel more at ease is knowing that I'm no longer the vulnerable person who was once easily manipulated. I'm still dealing with the consequences of all this. There are things that only time will heal. The debts she left, the bonds I lost because of it, are still obstacles. But in a strange way, I feel like I'm in control again. The feeling of helplessness that once gripped me is now replaced by the feeling that I can make a difference in my own life. I freed myself from lies and manipulation, and that, as simple as it may seem, was a turning point. There's no more room for lies in my world. I'm no longer anyone's hostage. Ultimately, I wanted this story to be an example of overcoming adversity, but more than that, I want it to be a reminder to whoever reads it. Never let anyone define you. Never allow yourself to be manipulated to the point where you lose control of your own life. the most difficult situations in our lives can become the greatest opportunities for growth, even if they seem unbearable at first. I'm not perfect, I'm still learning, and yes, there are days when the pain returns, but the freedom I gained was far greater than anything Sophia could take from me. And in the end, perhaps the greatest gift she gave me was showing me that the only person I need to care for and love is myself. You know, even after all this time, there are still days when I find myself wondering what could have been different. If only I had seen the signs sooner. If only I had trusted my instincts more. But at the same time, I know there's no point in dwelling on these issues. What really matters now is what I do with what I've learned. Every mistake, every frustration, every pain has taught me something. I finally understood that life isn't about being perfect, but about being true to yourself. Ultimately, I don't need anyone's approval to be happy. The only validation I need is my own. Even though I still bear the scars of my experience, the most important thing is what happened next, what I did next. I didn't remain trapped in the role of victim. This is something I learned the hard way, because suffering has this power to leave you stuck, waiting for something to change from the outside in. The truth, however, is that change needs to come from within. I needed to make peace with my choices, even the wrong ones, and understand that even if I was deceived, I still had the power to change my story. This is the key to overcoming grief. Stop waiting for others to solve things for you. I can no longer look back and think it was all in vain. Even though the experience was painful, it gave me a clarity in life I never imagined. When pain hits, it's almost impossible to see beyond it. But one day you wake up and realize it taught you something. I learned to be more firm in my choices, to better understand what truly matters, and to recognize signs of manipulation. The trust I lost with Sophia was re-established in myself, and today I know I can trust my own decisions. That in itself is already a huge victory. Sometimes I catch myself talking to myself about how things took such an unexpected turn. I thought I had everything under control, that I knew what I was doing. The truth is, no one is 100% prepared for betrayal and manipulation. But now I understand that amidst the chaos, there is always an opportunity for evolution. And that's what I try to focus on when the days are still difficult. I know I can get through anything life throws at me, because I've learned to protect myself, and more importantly, I've learned to trust myself. We are stronger than we think, and pain, though intense, is also fleeting. Today, my greatest wish is to be able to help others who are going through something similar. Because I know it's not easy to talk about it. It's not easy to admit we've been deceived. But the truth is that the first step to healing is honesty. If you're reading this and find yourself in a similar situation, know that there is a way back. It may not be quick, it may not be easy, but it is possible. Don't let anyone take away your peace. Don't let anyone destroy your confidence. You are stronger than you think, and ultimately, you are the only person who can write your own story.